All right, welcome back. This is Declassified, Chapter 3 of Cryptological Aspects of ESP. This chapter is a little bit longer than all of the other ones, and I'll try to go through this quickly, or at least faster than some of the other videos. I realize some of them have run over 40 or 50 minutes. All right, so Chapter 3, ESP, a Threat to ComSec. A survey of open literature. The author surveys open literature to determine whether there is acceptable scientific proof of the existence of the parapsychological phenomena herein described as telepathy and clairvoyance, and classed under the general heading of extrasensory perception, and to determine whether such phenomena, if they exist, constitute a significant threat to ComSec equipments, devices, and materials of the United States or the classified information protected by such equipments, devices, and materials. New paragraph, experimental difficulties and deficiencies. Many, if not most, reputable scientists have been skeptical as to the scientifically provable existence of phenomena which could be adequately demonstrated to satisfy the current definitions of telepathy and clairvoyance. Some of the reasons for their disbelief include the difficulty of isolating a phenomena which, if it exists, would be subject to extreme variations caused by human factors such as boredom, fear, and mere whim, the lack of precision in the definition of the talent understudy, and the scarcity of clear manifestations of the psychic talent to be tested. Some skepticism also resulted from frequently inclusive results of experiments and the inability of trained experimenters to develop repeatable experiments showing a continuing high rate of ESP performance. It has been suggested that when a psychic, a person alleged to have an ESP talent of considerable reputation, was involved, this problem was the result of testing under environmental conditions not tailored to the particular or peculiar needs of the talent being tested. New paragraph, significant experiments and observations. The following describes and comments on a few of the more significant ESP experiments which have been conducted and the results which have been obtained. Late in 1961, a small group of scientists formed a research team under the auspices of the Cambridge Research Institute, or laboratories, Office of Aerospace Research, the United States Air Force, to establish a scientifically unbiased method for testing and evaluating the ESP hypothesis. In their report, the group explained their views and aims as follows. Parapsychology, of which ESP is a branch, is not transitory. The subject is attracting the attention of an increasing number of respected scientists. With reports of significant ESP performance growing in number, it is apparent that the time is fast approaching when objective and emotionally unbiased scientists using rigorous experimental techniques must test the ESP hypothesis in order to make clear the nature of these phenomena to themselves and to the public. Moreover, until a sizable segment of the orthodox scientific community displays the integrity and courage to conduct a series of appropriate experiments and publishes both positive and negative results impartially, the ESP controversy will never be resolved. With this connection in mind, the authors converged on the problem of experimenting in ESP in order to 1. Test their own skills in experimental design by applying them to this little-known area. 2. Develop the knowledge which could lead to intelligent evaluations of existing studies and opinions in the field. 3. Have first-hand ESP testing experience with subjects in a controlled environment. 4. Gain experience in analyzing ESP-type responses in a rigorous statistical fashion. And 5. Evaluate various data collection, data reduction, and statistical analysis techniques for application to ESP data. New paragraph, repeatable experiments. One of the chief aims of the continuing Air Force studies in this field is to devise a repeatable experiment, as they state in paragraph 3 of their initial report. Opponents of ESP emphasize that a repeatable experiment has never been designed in this field. This standard is justified from a physical sciences standpoint, where repetition of experiments and consistency of results are mandatory and historically have been achievable. No person who appeared to have any significant ESP capabilities were found by the Air Force team during their first tests. It may be significant that the team confined its test exclusively to average persons, having no prior record to exhibiting ESP talents. It was also noted that little thought was given to tailoring the test's methods to conditions under which the phenomena might most readily be manifested in these subjects. The Air Force team makes use of the sheep, believers in parentheses, and goat, non-believers method developed by Dr. Gertrude Schmelder of the Psychology Department, City College of New York, and R.A. McConnell of the Biophysics Department, University of Pittsburgh. New paragraph. Repeatable techniques. Schmelder has been partially successful in developing a repeatable technique which could be used over and over again with consistent results. Over a 3-year period, she tested, using the 5-symbol ESP cards in 6 large-scale experiments, the hypothesis that belief or disbelief in the reality of ESP would incline her subjects to succeed or fail in the task. Working with decks of cards placed in another room or locked in a closet, she consistently obtained higher scores from those who believed in ESP. On one series of more than 4,000 tests, the sheep deviated from the chance expectation by plus 614, and the goats deviated by minus 301. Dr. Schmelder was not contending that her one experiment was needed to prove the ESP hypothesis. In her own report, ESP and Personality, she explains why so many scientists are still unconvinced. Uncareful reading, lack of knowledge of experiments with tightly controlled conditions performed by Pratt and Woodruff in 1939. She also points to phenomenal scores under conditions of considerable distance, such as those obtained by B.F. Rees in 1937. And there's a pull quote. Subject lived about a quarter of the mile from him. She agreed to stay while she made her responses in a room which faced away from his house. Out of 1,850 responses, parentheses, using the 5-symbol ESP cards, exit parentheses, where chance expectation was 370 successes, the obtained number of successes was 1,349. New paragraph. Environmental selectivity. Schmelder's examples in her experiments are impressive. However, she still neglects environmental selectivity and the testing of well-defined talent. The Pratt-Woodruff experiments, referred to by Schmelder, was particularly impressive. Under very well-controlled conditions, where the tester was not even aware of the success of the subject and the results were locked in a box, on 2,400 runs of ESP cards, the subject scored results against which the odds of chance happening were 1 in 500,000. New paragraph. Noted psychic. Between 1952 and 1955, Dr. Andrija Purak, MD, conducted experimentations as noted psychic or noted psychic. There's a couple handwritten notes for corrections on the document here. One of the more interesting experiments was described as follows. The electrical target was a random generator pulsed by big cosmic ray showers and a moving paper graph recorded on switch period of 10 seconds. This provided an electrical target appearing in a random sequence which followed a position distribution or Poisson distribution. The subject was separated from the electrical target by a distance of 0.3 miles. The subject was further shielded from the electrical target by being stored inside the double Faraday cage. Mrs. Garrett, the psychic, was asked to call the arrival time of the cosmic ray pulse that activated the pen and was allowed 15 seconds after the target in which to qualify for a hit. In Group 5 of the test experiment of Project, I guess that would be Project 6, I'm not sure what that references, there appeared a total of 59 targets, and these were distributed in the Poisson series with a mean of 0.475. In relation to these targets, Mrs. Garrett made 61 calls distributed in the poison series with a mean of 0.491. Statistical analysis of a group 5 yielded a critical ratio of 4.87 with a probability of 0.00001, or odds of chance of 1,000,000 to 1. The uncharged cage control experiment yielded a critical ratio of 1.08, or chance expectation. The critical ratio of difference between these two experiments is 4.43. This result was considered statistically significant and argued for extrasensory cognition on the part of Mrs. Garrett. However, because the possibility that large cosmic ray showers could simultaneously strike the target area and the call area, it was felt that the evidence for no electrical interaction was incomplete. The controls for the experiment, as they are represented by the doctor, seem to be good. The experiment appears to be tailored to Mrs. Garrett's talent. The results appear to be significant evidence in favor of the ESP hypothesis, except for the qualification made in the last sentence quoted above, which shows an unusual human sensitivity to cosmic rays. New paragraph. Spontaneous ESP. Between January and October 1956, Dr. Pouriarch conducted a series of experiments testing the capability of the noted Dutch psychic Peter Hurkos. Among the most significant were the following demonstrations of spontaneous ESP, all of which occurred before witnesses and 2 of which involved persons of good academic reputation. The object contained in a sealed package. 1. Professor C.J. Dukas, noted EPS investigator of Brown University, gave Mr. Loring to submit to Hurkos for psychometrizing, is a small pottery jar. This was broken but mended, which was given to me in 1922 by the late Dr. Stevenson Smith, professor of psychology at the University of Washington. He said it came from the ruins of Pompeii. In Italy, buried in 79 AD, in the ashes thrown up by eruption of Vesuvius, Mr. Hurkos said, "This object blew up in an explosion. There was an explosion a long time ago. I hear the language, it is very old. It had to do with water. I don't know what it is. I see a dark color. It is not straight, not regular. It very jagged, sharp points. I am sure of this. Dr. Ducassi didn't buy this. It was given to him and it was repaired. A souvenir. I am sure the owner of the cylinder is dead. I do not mean Dr. Ducassi. He is well." So we're going on to the second experiment. Julian Huxley, the noted scientist, and his wife visited the laboratory on the 26th of August, 1956. In this test, Mr. Huxley handed a sealed envelope to Harry Stone, who went to the opposite side of the room. Peter Hurkos was to concentrate on Harry Stone holding the sealed envelope to see if he could get any impression. These are his words. "I now go to the hospital room and I see a bureau and a blonde woman. I see a woman who lives outside of town, a musical person. A ring has been lost. The woman had an accident on the legs. I see airplanes and bombs. Don't forget me, Frank and Lillian Wood. I see writing on a photograph. I feel a woman." Hurkos was wrong, but he realized that the picture described was, in fact, in Mr. Huxley's wallet and normally touched the test picture. Mr. Huxley affirmed that Hurkos' description of the photograph still in his wallet, sketchy though it was accurate. A friend of mine gave Peter Hurkos a letter sealed in a manila envelope. Hurkos handled this letter and then made the following statements to my friend in response. "This letter is from your wife. She seems to be in good health at the moment, but she will have trouble with her female organs." Hurkos then drew a diagram of the uterus and the fallopian tube with a large mass in the center portion. Hurkos then went on to say that in about 6 months the female organs would give rise to complications which would require surgical intervention. 6 months after this reading, the woman in question began to develop severe cramps, irregular bleeding, and low back pain. At the Mayo Clinic's hysterectomy was performed. A hysterectomy was performed. The left fallopian tube had a large sealed-off mass. We're going on to another example. 2 businessmen, Mr. C.V. Wood and Mr. Tom Slick wanted to test Hurkos' ability to get intelligence from an object sealed in a package. At this time, May 1959, Hurkos was staying in Miami and two gentlemen visited him there. They had arranged to have Mr. Wood's secretary in Los Angeles, California, mail them a sealed package whose contents were not revealed to them until after the experiment was complete. In this particular instance, Hurkos was not allowed to touch the sealed package. Furthermore, it was held by another gentleman who went into the next room so that Hurkos could not even see the shape of it. Hurkos' statement as follows: I see in this package some brown hair from a dog. I see a leather collar from a dog with brass trimmings on it. This package is about a small dog, brown in color. The dog has a lame left hind leg. The owner of the dog does not know what is wrong with it. The doctor thinks it is some sort of arthritis. I think that this is due to neuritis. I believe this will be cured by some sort of shock. The sealed package contains some brown dog hair, and it contained a metal chain from a dog. There was no leather brass trimmed dog collar in the box. The other statements were remarkable in their knowledge of the situation. The dog in question was a brownish poodle called Coco. The dog had been sick for several weeks, limping and favoring his left hind leg. The most curious aspect, a week after the reading by Hurkos, the dog was hit by a car but merely rolled over, and after this accident the limp disappeared and the dog had been well since that time. These spontaneous performances are as controlled as is possible under the circumstances. The relation of chance to these demonstrations represent either fraud or the unique expression of a genuine talent. Well, with the caliber of the witnesses involved, fraud seems unlikely. On January 1941, Dr. S.G. Soule, highly respected scientist, began a series of tests for telepathy and precognition, which were to last for a year. The principal subject was Mr. Basil Shackleton. Previous experiments has shown that Shackleton had achieved significant positive results. His talent had a peculiarity, however. Previous results had shown that Shackleton's correct card guesses were always related to the card which the sender had just previously transmitted. Soule was particularly interested in verifying both Shackleton's talent and its peculiar manifestations. More than 18,000 individual tests were performed. Shackleton showed only a slightly higher than chance expectation on direct calls of the card being looked at. Then we have a couple lists of the trials, expected hits, actual hits, deviation, standard deviation. And we go through, however, when the card calls were related to the card immediately preceding the one being concentrated on, the results were quite different. So the actual hits increased when they accounted for him actually guessing the previous card shown versus the immediate card shown. It went up by about 400 actual hits, and the deviation was 325. The standard deviation remained the same. So back to reading. In other words, the Shackleton telepathy experiments show odds against chance of at least 10 million to 1. The character of the experimenter, the careful tailoring of the experiments to the talent of the psychic, and the tight scientific controls, the experimental results must be seriously considered as showing very strong evidence in favor of the ESP hypothesis. This view is shared by L.L. Vasilyev, the principal Russian experimenter. See page 39, 38 of his work. There's a reference there for that. New paragraph, suggestion at a distance. As Vasilyev also shows, scientific viewers generally hold Soule's work in high regard. New paragraph, TV summary of ESP research. On June 16, 1966, ABC TV presented a documentary entitled The Baffling World of ESP. Many scientists studying in the field were represented. Among them were many of the scientists. There's some typos in here, so I apologize for that. Among them were psychologist Gardner Murphy, psychiatrist Montague Ullman, and physicist Henry Margenau. The participants were as varied in their nationality as in their scientific and psychic talents. English medium Douglas Johnson gave before the camera a convincing demonstration of ESP. He revealed many detailed facts about a woman and her father, neither of whom he had previously known, according to the TV network. Dr. Milan Reisel, PhD of Czechoslovakia, gave a partially successful demonstration of the gifts of one of the clairvoyants, which he trained by hypnotic methods. A representative of the University of Utrecht, who further represents the Parapsychological Institute of the university, had been observing Dutch psychic Gerard Crosset for several years. He testified that Crosset had repeatedly demonstrated, during the period he was under surveillance, an amazingly dependable ability to find lost people, especially children. Crosset's performance was particularly convincing. Even though lacking laboratory controls, the probabilities involved in consistently being able to find lost persons are obviously well beyond chance, especially when the location of such a person was often not known by anyone. Such a long surveillance should have uncovered any fraud. Of particular interest in the field of parapsychological research is the quality and quantity of Soviet bloc research being conducted. A partial list of bloc scientists involved would include Milan Reisel, M. Kotrovovic, Dr. A. Dubrovsky, B. Kaczynski, Jurani Dumazovo, Edward Naumov, Dr. G.V. Reyes, K.I. Platonov, Dr. N.A. Panov, K.D. Kutkov, and particularly Leonid L. Vasilyev. The effort which the admittedly materialistic Soviet bloc researchers are expanding in ESP research is remarkable. The sophistication and positive results achieved by the bloc effort are exemplified by the description of the following series of tests carried out by Yazoyev in 1961 or 1962. So we're going to go through some descriptions of that research. The subject, awake, was given the instructions to rhythmically press on the balloon connected to a rotating chemograph drum, like a seismograph. At a given point, unknown to the subject, an indicator in another room gave her the mental suggestion to fall asleep. The pneumatic recording of her movements continued while she was still awake. However, the moment the percipient was hypnotized, that's the subject, the movements stopped and the recording equipment marked an even line. When suggested to wake up, the percipient, with no additional instructions, renewed her squeezing of the balloon, interrupted during her hypnotic sleep. 3 subjects were tested in this experiment. There were 260 tests of mental hypnosis and awakening. There were 6 failures to wake and 21 failures to hypnotize the patient within a 10-minute period. In 91 instances, the percipient responded to the command within 2 minutes after it was given. 73 of these responses were within 1 minute. This experiment was scientific, repeatable, and convincing evidence for ESP. Vasilyev's book, Suggestion at a Distance, contains the following quotation on page 38, in which the English philosopher George Price, remaining unconvinced of ESP as being supranormal, acknowledges the success of parapsychology. And this is his quote. A peculiarity of our times is the fact that in the past 15 years, from 1940 to 1955, there has hardly been a single scientific article criticizing the work of the parapsychologists. This victory is the result of, through extensive experimentation and sensible argumentation, the best of Rhine and soul experiments and guessing cards indicates a tremendous difference compared to any possible accidental coincidence. The possibility of prompting is almost excluded since the cards and the percipient were in different buildings. Positive results were obtained from dozens of experiments, and the mathematical computations were approved by leading statisticians. Price remains unconvinced because parapsychology is incompatible with modern scientific theory. It could be concluded that, despite overzealousness, carelessness, and exaggerated carefulness on the part of the scientific investigators, there is, in the aggregate, solid evidence that some men who are talented in PSI direction can know other men's thoughts, sometimes, and it is not necessary that the talented person be within what is considered the normal human sensory range. Telepathy has been asserted by reputable witnesses to have taken place over a distance of many miles. Some talented men are able to perceive objects inside other solid objects, to describe such hidden objects in detail, and often to describe personal details of persons who previously had touched the hidden objects without having any other access to such information. Such clairvoyant performances have been observed by reputable witnesses to take place where the clairvoyant merely touches but does not rattle or shake the outside container. Sometimes this type of person is able to describe internal conditions of human beings in detail when said persons are miles distant, again according to reliable witnesses. Because of the detailed accuracy in the clairvoyant descriptions of some of the experiments, and because of the ability of some of the telepathic receivers studied to tune in on the mind of the pre-selected sender, ESP can constitute a significant threat against ComSec equipments, devices, and materials if such a talent is developed to a dependable degree. Because of the small pool of dependable psychic talent, such a threat would probably be used only against selected high-echelon diplomatic or military communications. Some of the most lucrative targets for such a threat would seem to be the message drafter, the message typist, the clear text message in a known place, the man who keys the crypto machine on the crypto device, and the crypto material user or handler. Keying materials, the simpler in construction, the greater the likelihood of their vulnerability, the encrypted message, and the encrypted signal. There is some indication from the ESP test study that talented psychics operating in teams might increase the reliability and accuracy of the material psychically perceived. Very few naturally gifted psychics with continuously dependable talents exist today, and the ability to train such talent does not presently exist. Although Dr. Milan Rizal of Czechoslovakia has demonstrated some limited success in training psychics by using a hypnotic technique. Let me just underline that here. Keep in mind that a lot of the information in this document has been advanced upon since its writing, and even these authors, the co-authors who may be involved, counteract this existing thinking in this document overall. Okay, so there are indications that physical conditions can be created which will hinder the operation of the psychic talent. Boredom and even small increases in normal levels of carbon dioxide and positive ions can hinder good performance, as well as promote its positive achievement. Sleep, hypnosis, chemical stimulants, and negative ions promote good performance. Appendix A contains a summary of optimum conditions for telepathic interaction as described by the Russian parapsychologist Vasilyev and the American Dr. Puark. So this is the appendix. And, optimum conditions for telepathy. Using ideas or mental images on which the inductor, sender, has concentrated his attention to a maximal extent. Using ideas on mental images which have emotional value to the inductor and receiver, consciously or unconsciously. Using a clear image deliberately guided toward the intended recipient. Testing while the percipient, the receiver, is in the state of neutral consciousness or trance, hypnosis, sleep, great fear, concern, or a feeling of sensitivity. The existence of a feeling of success on the part of the sender and especially the receiver. The existence of telepathic rapport between sender and receiver. Permitting the sender to determine the time of image or idea transmission. The prior establishment in a period of time close to that of the testing period. a good normal communications between individuals participating in the test, as spontaneous cases of telepathy often occur between persons who have a depth of common concerns, such as members of the same family. The development of spontaneous atmosphere around the target material on constructing the test environment in such a way that it offers a considerable challenge to the percipient's capability. And then there's another appendix with a complete listing of research laboratories where they source this material. And I'll just read the name of the universities instead of going through the doctors. Rhodes University, Union of South Africa. University of London, Oxford University, Parapsychological Laboratory. Menninger Foundation, supported by a grant of Idelson Family Foundation. William C. Menninger Dream Laboratory, Brooklyn, New York. Duke University, a grant from Durham University. Newark College of Engineering, Stanford Research Institute. University of Stanford, UCLA Neurological Institute. The Mellon Charitable Trust supports work at University of Pittsburgh. Parapsychology Laboratory, St. Joseph College, Philadelphia. Laboratory for Psychics, University of Pittsburgh. Human Ecology Fund of New York, grant to Oxford. Modern work in the field of ESP, a partial list. Now this is a different appendix, Appendix B. So again, that's modern work in the field of ESP, a partial list. As of 1954 and beyond, work on ESP was being conducted or supported by the following additional persons and institutions. This is in Canada. Parapsychology Laboratory, University of King's College, Halifax. This is in Germany. Institute for Mental Hygienic and Boulder Line Studies, Freiburg, Germany. This is Netherlands. University of Utrecht, Chair of Parapsychology. Spain. This is the Groningen, University Holland. I'm sorry, the previous one was Holland. This one is Spain. University del Litoral. And then the USSR, the Leningrad State University. So that is the end of chapter 3. And I'm going to cut this short without any commentary here. I actually will come back and do another series of commentary over the chapters, and I'll probably label them and reference them that. And then over on the right of the screen, add some additional corresponding materials that I think further illuminate the context of where we are now in terms of technology, research and study, laws, bills, and other things taking place in our contemporary time with regards to this older research, which just based on this chapter alone shows that someone was doing research at a high level as far back as the 20s and 30s. All right, thanks for listening.